Turn myself off. I'm sorry. I just figured I'm loud. Okay, so we call to order the Planning Committee meeting for October 1st, 2014. All members present except David Durant. Public comment, members of the public, anybody wishing to speak to any item not on the agenda tonight? Public comments open, going once, going twice. I don't see anybody rushing to the podium. Closed. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes.
Move approve. Second.
Okay, motion by the ladies. We have Mitchoff 1, Abelson 2. I'll assume that there is no opposition. 401. The one being Durant not present. Consent calendar, generally routine in nature. Anybody wishing from the audience to pull any item? Any cards? Don't see any. Any motions or anybody up here wanting to move or pull?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion, a slow motion. Romick, second. Abelson. Seeing no opposition, I will talk long. No. All those in favor of the consent calendar say aye.
Aye.
No opposition, 5-0. Okay, first item on the agenda. I will ask the indulgence of the committee. Pretty standard item. A lot of talk on it. The idea is to approve combining CCTA New Freedom Cycle 3 with New Freedom Cycle 5. Do we have any cards on it, Diane? Seeing none, do you wish to have a staff report?
I would like a brief one just to explain what the function of this item is, please.
You're up, Peter.
Okay, so there's a lot of information in there about mobility management, just to take you back to the discussion we've had in the past about mobility management and give you a brief update of what's been going on in the county kind of organically. The main function of this item is to combine a Cycle 3 New Freedom grant that we have to do a web-based data. It's a database, put it on the web for people to be able to access countywide services that are all parts of the county, so that they can see what services are out there that might fit for them. We want to combine that grant with an existing Cycle 5 New Freedom grant that County Connection has. It'll just streamline the administration of the grant. They will still fulfill the project of being the web application on a countywide basis, and we will oversee make sure that gets done.
And it's limited to that in this phase. Okay.
That's correct.
I'm ready to move the item if no one else has anything.
Okay, motion Abelson, second from Mitchoff to approve combining a CCTA New Freedom Cycle 3 and the County Connection New Freedom Cycle 5 grant. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Don't see anybody abstaining. We're on to 3.1. This is also, that was a CMA function in 2. We're on to 3. Martin, you got an update on the 2014 countywide transportation plan and all those other numbers that are bold.
Yes,
Martin
Mr.
Engelman.
Chairman, thank you. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning, and we're going to give you an update on the CTP. We have a number of things going on tonight. First, I'll give you an update on the schedule. And then second, Lindsay Willis, our Director of External Affairs, is going to give you the status of our public outreach effort on the CTP. And then third, we'll have a brief report from our consultant, Lamphere Gregory, and they will tell you about the supplemental EIR that was released. And then fourth is an opportunity for public comment on either of those plans if anybody wants to come up. We've opened this public meeting. We've actually announced this public meeting in the newspaper to let people know if they want to comment on either the plan or the environmental document tonight, they can do that. So regarding the schedule, the original schedule was to release the countywide plan, 2014 countywide plan, in early August, with comments due close of September. We also anticipated releasing the draft EIR, a supplemental EIR, in mid-August, and that was actually postponed a month due to issues we ran into with the modeling and the transportation modeling and getting the thing updated to the projections 2013 land use database. So the EIR was delayed, and we finally got that out the door on September 19th. 45-day review period for that runs till November 3rd. So in consultation with the CTP Ad Hoc Committee, we asked and they gave us approval to extend the comment period for the CTP out to November 3rd. So now both documents are running out until close of business on Monday, November, did I say November? On Monday, November 3rd, just so you're aware of that. This meeting is open for public comment on the 15th when the authority meets. They too will have this item open for public comment. We close on November 3rd, and then we're going to take all of the public input we received that Lindsay's been collecting. We're going to take that back out to the regional committees and give that to them so that they can see if there are any comments on their action plans, if there are any comments on their projects or programs, new bright ideas that have come up. In order to accommodate that review and update the action plans, the 2014 CTP probably is not going to be adopted now until February. We had originally hoped to do it in December, and that was a very tight schedule, but to get it back through the regional committees, back through our technical coordinating committee, we plan on bringing it back to this committee as a final document in February for adoption in February 2015. And we would still call it the 2014 CTP. So that's the news on the schedule, and I wanted to make you aware of that and ask if you have any questions or comments on the schedule.
Seeing none, move right ahead.
The past month has been very exciting, and Lindsay has helped us hold 5 workshops and a telephone town hall, and I think they were all highly successful. So now I'll turn it over to Lindsay Willis on a report on our public outreach effort for the 2014 CTP.
Okay, Lindsay, you got public outreach. Am I okay where I'm at? You're not seeing my head, or we're good? You got it.
Okay, hold on. A little easier to reach, then I don't have to do it sideways. Since this is a multi-part item, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. This is a highlight on our public outreach update, and the information is current as of last week. So we're a little less than the halfway mark by a few days. As you may remember, in February and March, we did some phone surveys, and I just wanted to refresh your memory on some of the items that came out of those as top priorities. One of them being my favorite new term of the year, traffic smoothing on major roads. Pothole repair, BART, highways. I know you can read it, so I won't read it to you. As Martin mentioned, we embarked on a big public outreach effort in relation to the CTP. These are some of the items that we have done as part of that. We did an online public engagement tool, in-person workshops, telephone town hall. We had printed copies, and we're taking comments via email and mail. So we're trying to make ourselves as accessible as possible to the public. For the 5 in-person public workshops, we had more than 130 attendees, and although the picture at the bottom isn't that great, it just kind of gives you an idea of some of the exercises we did, which was allowing people to look at maps that consisted of action plans in their area and kind of submit their own comments by writing in on it. And overall, the tone was very positive, and the comments were widespread, depending on which part of the county we were in, but people really took time and gave us a lot of thoughtful input. As Randy mentioned, the last item we did last week was a telephone town hall. It was very successful. We had more than 4,000 people on the call for some period of time, and you can kind of see we had quite a few folks enter the queue to ask questions, and actually at the end of the call there was an option for people to leave a message if we couldn't get to them, and I think our mailbox filled up. We're still trying to wade through and return all of those phone calls. But again, overall it was really positive, and I should be getting that posted on our website this week so you can hear it if you didn't have a chance to listen to it. We also have our online engagement tool up, keepcontracostamoving.net. We've had 2,700 visitors, and 350 of those took the time to create an account and 281 of those submitted their idea to us. So we're getting a lot of ideas, and people were allowed to vote on their transportation priorities in a very unscientific way on this. And as you can see, this is the way the priorities were shaking out as of last week. It was kind of BART, bicycles, buses, pedestrians, local streets, etc. We also had the option for people to take a paper survey, and so far we've gotten about 107 of them. We've gotten 54 emails, and Diane has taken the bulk of the phone calls, so I'm sure she'll be happy to tell you there's been after the telephone town hall, we probably doubled that number. I haven't even had a chance to tally how many more we've gotten, which is really great. We asked for feedback and we're getting it. And this is my pitch, because I've used this presentation with our Citizens Advisory Committee as well, that it's not too late. We're still listening, and you might recognize some of those folks in the back row of the Hercules workshop, and Martin and I greeting people at the door. So, we're trying to remind people and alert them that the comment period is still open. And that concludes my really...
Let me get this on. Questions of, actually a comment, if I can, I'll start it off. Just today, I got an email, somebody had a bright idea, don't put BART down 680, do the monorail like Seattle and blah, blah, blah. To staff and to the board, committee, do we pass these things on? I mean, really, do you want secondhand stuff just pushed on? Because it could be, we could take out your phones and your email. I mean, how do you feel about that, if I can ask it kind of a questions directed out to staff? Do you want to just forward, and do you do it without getting the permission? For example, I had somebody today write me an email saying, I don't want BART down 680. What I want is something like the monorail that's in Seattle and some other stuff, and he went through, he had an opinion. He sent it to the wrong person. But in actuality, he sent it to the right person. Is this something that because we're all going to get these, and staff's opinion, do you want us to put forward attachment, move it on? Okay, just so we're all clear, because some people will, some people won't, and from what I'm hearing, just no motion needed, we're just taking a report, that it probably gets mentioned under the report when you do it to the full board, pass these things on. Okay, keep going. Who's next?
I just wanted to make one request. If you're going to pass them on, of course, you're welcome to send them to Martin and I, but we also have a specific email address, the 2014 CTP at ccta.net. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but it's on some of the flyers, and I'm happy to email it out. But I'm using that to kind of track all of the comments we get via email. Yeah. Thank you.
Now that you've said yes, send it to all of us so that we got our thing. Anyway, it's one of those little things you touch a base. Who's next, Martin? We're through two?
Okay, and now we'll hear a report from Chris Ford of Lamphere Gregory to tell us about the 2014 CTP draft supplemental EIR. You may have heard other CMAs around the region have sometimes done an EIR, sometimes not done an EIR. In consultation with our attorneys, we were told that because of the action plans for routes of regional significance, which involve actions by regional bodies, the RTPCs, and the projects that are in the countywide plan, that it would be advisable for us to do an environmental review, and that environmental review turned out to be not a full EIR, but a supplemental EIR based on the 2009 CTP. It was issued September 19th, and here is Chris to give you a report on what's in it.
You're up, Chris. Yep. As soon as you push it and you see a light.
All right. Excellent. This is about an EIR, so there aren't any pictures. I'm really sorry about that. So as Martin just said, this is a supplemental EIR. I'll explain that more in a few minutes. But Just like the past EIRs and the past updates of the CTPs, this is a programmatic EIR. It looks at the CTP as a single project, doesn't look at all the individual project impacts. So it looks at this as a regional project. What are the regional impacts? There is some discussion of theoretical localized things such as, well, if there's construction, could there be air quality impacts at a local level, but it doesn't go into those. All the projects that are contained within the CTP will have their own separate project level environmental review. This is the process that's happened for all the past CTPs. The approach was very similar to that used for the 2009 EIR. There were some adjustments. There were revisions to thresholds of significance, and that was only to reflect changes in law, best practices, and the like. There were new model runs because it's a new existing conditions. Those are used with the latest projections from ABAG, projections 2013. The baseline year for impact evaluation was moved up 5 years to 2040. It was 2035 last time. And based on some comments from council, there was additional analysis and mitigation related to construction period impacts. Supplemental EIR is very similar to a regular EIR, but you're able to do one this time because there have been very few changes in the county and the existing conditions compared to 2009. The geology, the hydrology, et cetera, haven't really changed. And also the CTP is very similar to the 2009 version. The projects are very similar, or they're smaller in impact. There aren't dramatic changes in terms of what it does. Because it's a supplemental EIR, new content's only needed under one of these 4 conditions: significant change in the environmental setting, new resources discovered, projects that would have a very different or greater kind of impact, or mostly if there's projects in new locations. And so overall, it's a very small EIR compared to how huge they can be, and it only adds the information that supplements the 2009 EIR in order to make it apply to the 2014 CTP. It was quicker to do, and it's easier to read. Otherwise, the process is the same as a regular EIR. The main findings, the CTP would improve future conditions compared to a theoretical no project scenario. In other words, the environmental situation will be better in 2040 than it would be if you didn't do the project. Overall, the projects have very similar impacts to those in the last CTP, and the mitigation measures used in the past are pretty much adequate. They've been updated to reflect some changes in best practices. As I mentioned, there's an additional mitigation measure for construction period impacts. This is the only thing that's visually interesting in this slideshow, and this is just a comparison of the transportation impacts of the project to existing conditions, as well as to the no project scenario. Overall, many things, VMT, drive alone mode share, and transit ridership will improve naturally between now and 2040, but the CTP will actually make things that much better. Vehicle hours of delay will naturally increase between now and 2040 simply because of population growth and other development. The CTP would actually make the situation much better than it would if you didn't do the CTP. The one thing that CEQA was very concerned about, significant unavoidable impacts. There were 5 found. 4 of them were the same as there were in the 2009 EIR. The only new one relates to short-term impacts on air quality near construction sites. This was actually an impact found in the last EIR, and it was found to be significant but mitigable. The reason that this conclusion was changed is to be consistent with the EIR for Plan Bay Area. That's the Regional Transportation Plan, and the EIR for that had new guidance related to. They found that that would be a conservatively significant unavoidable impact. So that's the only reason why that change was made. Per CEQA, there were actually 4 alternatives assessed in comparison to the plan. One is the no project alternative, and then the other 3 were very similar to those in the 2009 version. And these all made assumptions about settings and policy in terms of a slightly different focus. Maximize freeway performance, increase transit ridership, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. None of the alternatives would avoid significant and unavoidable impacts. Of all of these, the environmentally superior alternative is number 3 because it would have slightly better outcomes in terms of VMT and other traffic metrics, as well as greenhouse gas and noise. But overall, the difference between the CTP as proposed and all the alternatives is relatively minor. Next steps, as Martin mentioned, close of business November 3rd. All public comments are due. You need to consider all the public comments submitted by then. You don't have to consider any submitted afterwards. The final supplemental EIR will be released in January. What that contains is simply responses to public comments, as well as the public comments themselves, any changes made to the EIR and changes to the CTP that would relate any mistakes, and then final certification would happen likely in February, presentations to you all as well as the board.
Okay, this is questions on item 3 of 3. Is there anyone? Go ahead, Janet.
Yeah, I have a question. Normally, I'm used to seeing an EIR, and if nothing has changed, that's good.
Yeah.
But right now, we're talking about AB 32 and SB 375, and we're supposed to have goals and targets for reducing a lot of things. And how does that play into this?
It's a
Can you go to slide 3, Chris, while
Oh,
you're
yeah.
answering that? Because I think that's kind of probably not that baseline impact relative.
this one.
Go ahead and get hers, and then we'll go.
I don't know which one is which number. That's a very interesting question. So AB 32 and SB 375 really direct the state as well as the MPOs, in this case MTC, to actually take action as directed by CARB on that. So for the Bay Area region, MTC is really doing that work through its regional transportation plan, also known as Plan Bay Area. That's the current one. We did update the thresholds of significance for greenhouse gas emissions and climate change to reflect some of these changes in practice. But because the CTP improves the situation in terms of VMT and vehicle speed and single mode share, transit ridership, it would have less than significant impacts, and in fact beneficial impacts as related to greenhouse gas emissions.
But would it, I guess I look at my own city, now we have a climate action plan, and when we were doing that, we found out that, I don't know, it was either between 40 and 50% of our, what's the word?
No, I'm
I'm
drawing a
forgetting the
blank.
word. The climate, the
Emissions?
Greenhouse gas.
greenhouse gases, I guess, I'm not even sure if that's the
Yeah.
word, but that's getting close, are caused by transportation. So even at a city level, we actually are saying that there's a big issue there, at least in our city. And so then when we get to this is kind of the bigger picture. This is the bigger picture than the city picture,
Right.
right? But it's not as big as the multi-county picture. So if, for example, not that this is saying that, but if we said everything will be the same, in the old days, that would have been okay, I think. But under AB 32, SB 375, that's not okay, because there's a target that by such and such a year we have to have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by the target. So I'm just having trouble putting all that together.
Well, again, AB 32 places requirements on the state government of California. SB 375 places requirements, again, on the state as well as on the MPOs. In this case, it would be MTC. And so local jurisdictions at this point really only need to follow the guidance contained within CEQA itself. And along those lines, those tend to be about ensuring that there's no net increase in greenhouse gases or none per capita. The way the thresholds are set up in the CIR is whether or not implementation of the plan combined with forecast countywide growth would contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. What's found is that they will continue to increase, but the project being the CTP, won't contribute to those in a considerable way. So when you view this from an EIR standpoint, it's a matter of, does this project make things worse? Does it make things significantly worse for a particular issue? In the case of this, the environmental impact report found that no, it doesn't.
Okay, so it's sort of ignoring the AB 32, SB 375 requirement for a reduction.
Well,
I think- right?
there's no legal requirement, as far as I know, on the authority to take
Yeah,
any
but
action.
if we're on the state level and on the local level, at least in my city, I know it's that way, we think we have an obligation to do something about it, but the transportation that's being planned does nothing about it, then that actually prevents us from meeting both the state target and the local target.
Martin has a,
Go ahead, Martin.
If I could respond to that, Commissioner Abelson, we are achieving all the targets by virtue of reflecting the sustainable community strategy in our countywide plan, and that is primarily done through identification of the priority development areas and having those areas grow housing and jobs in accordance with the allocations that are in ABAG's projections 2013. That's how they got to the 15% reduction by 2035, and that's how we get to it too. And so we are meeting those requirements, and we are in compliance with that statewide
Okay,
requirement through
which
our
is
plan.
a little bit different than what you said, right?
I just said that you don't, as far as I'm aware, the authority does not have a legal requirement to do these things. That
No, I
maybe
mean,
as a-
earlier when I thought you said something different. So the answer that I just got from Martin is the answer that I would hope to hear, actually.
So, Chris, that'll teach you.
Yeah. In the future, I'm going
In
to
the
point at
future,
Martin.
give them the answer that I would have given them.
Okay, wait a minute. No,
He was doing
Chris.
great up to now.
Can you go
wasn't he?
back towards the first one? There's just one, right? No, the next, you've got, where you're, in short, you're talking about why you only have to do a supplemental.
Yeah.
And a few changes that are, I have to tell you that that slide and the one previous, when I looked at it, reminds me a lot of the slides I saw at the Air District about 2-3 years ago, right before BIA sued us. I would, about CEQA guidelines, et cetera. I mean, for what it's worth, I'd make one call to Brian Bunger at the Air District and make sure that everybody feels you're on the same page. Because the one thing we never get is the Air District has stationary sources and CARB has the mobility sources, but there are agreements in there too. And I don't want to know the answer. Maybe Kevin does, but you might be surprised that BIA doesn't look at supplementals the same way. And there are no projects in the CEQA guidelines. And that's what I was focusing. Somewhere in there it said something about there are no projects or projections, is probably what I was looking at. But that's okay. I'm under drugs, so I get a lot of leeway. All right. Any questions on 3? Any questions on 2? Any questions on 1? Go
I
ahead.
did have I don't know if this is a question or more of a comment about the process. And it seems like this is and I don't know if I'm in the right, I think I'm in the right,
You're on 3?
I think I'm on, yeah, I think this is the right place to ask this
Yeah, get
question.
Chris again.
So, looking all the way back to the this agency's plan for the year, it was to do one innovative project or program, and I believe this was the one chosen. Am I right, staff? That's right? So it looks to me like, in fact, that was undertaken to do innovation on this, to do things differently, and I am very impressed, I have to say, that I can see that a lot of energy and effort went into it, and I think it was successful. Are you doing an analysis of what worked and what didn't, sort of, or something with the process, just looking at it from a viewpoint of the process? And would we, if we were doing some other topic, want to use this process with modifications or whatever?
Are you referring to the CTP planning overall or to the supplemental approach?
I'm referring to the public outreach.
Public outreach.
That was just
That's Lindsay. That's 2.
I'll just slide in
That
here
would be
really
two.
quickly. We are going to take a look at what worked and what didn't. We're still collecting comments, and we're kind of in the weeds on things right now because it's ongoing. So I think that is planned for later this year after the close of comments, because I think we really want to evaluate as best we can, where all the comments came from and, what methods kind of brought us more thoughtful comments versus other types of comments.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll move on to Part 4, the opportunity for public comment on the draft 2014 CTPS EIR. Do we have any cards, Diane? Does anybody want to speak to this? We'll close the public comment. We're asking for a staff report, receive public comment, which you've done. Somebody want to move that? Oh, come on. I didn't put you guys to sleep. I have a motion, Romick, and a second, Abelson. Okay. Okay. Any opposition? That's 5-0, Diane. Somebody went to sleep there. Obviously, nobody cares about 4. Should we move on to 5?
Yeah. Good idea.
Item 4. Martin, you have this one too. No, we're not getting past this one, guys. And we do have one speaker card. If anybody else wants to speak to it, please fill out a card, give it to Diane. Martin, you have the floor on 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So item 4 is a proposal that's coming to us from the West County Regional Transportation Planning Committee, known as WCTAC. And as we've done our outreach for this countywide plan, we've talked about kind of some big ticket items out there that are actually not yet fully in the plan, like extending EBART out to Brentwood, from Antioch to Brentwood. We've had lots of calls for transit down the 680 corridor here, some kind of transit. We've heard in West County about extending BART north of the current terminus in Richmond, or some other alternative solution or a transit service. And we also have, of course, in the Tri-Valley area, the extension of BART out to Livermore. So it kind of all falls under the rubric of expanding the BART system in Contra Costa and Alameda counties. And the way it kind of gets initiated is through a study. And what WCTAC has done is they've set forth a very general scope for a $1.2 million study that would evaluate everything from buses, express buses, light rail, bus rapid transit, EBART type of diesel multiple units, or actual full BART extension. And how big it is and where it goes, we don't know. But the idea of this study would be to start to look at that specifically for West County. And I want to introduce John Nemeth. He is here as the executive director for WCTAC, and he can answer any questions.
If you're going to be part of the staff, John, you get to sit, push one of the pretty buttons, and a red light comes on.
But essentially, the request, and this is, I think at this point, it's still fairly an informal request, but I thought we should bring it to you just to kind of see your reaction. The study's $1.2 million. WCTAC has put in $300,000. BART has committed to $300,000, and the concept would be that the authority and MTC would also put in $300,000 for a total of $1.2 million. And recently, WCTAC increased their share by another $100,000. They're using Measure C sub-regional transportation needs funds for this. So we actually have $1.2 million study and probably a $100,000 contingency. The basic elements of the scope are in the board letter, and then we have a more detailed scope attached. If we were to participate in this, we would use federal funding, and we would use our surface transportation planning funding that we get from MTC. This is currently not in your adopted budget. We would have to amend the budget this year or include it in next year's budget. And also, for us to use the federal money, this project would need to be federalized. So if WCTAC runs the project, they would have to federalize the project, federalize the procurement process, and follow all the federal regulations. So I'll close. I'll ask if John wants to add anything at this point, and then we can go into discussion.
Okay. And before you do it, because you may get questions, we'll treat you like Chris there in a minute. The recommendation is to consider using federal funds to participate in the study and provide direction to staff on the authority's role in the study. You have the floor, John.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. I first want to thank Randy and his staff for their creativity in identifying this as a possible source for this effort and for the willingness to bring this forward for your consideration tonight. One of the things that we heard a lot at the workshops in West County, both in Richmond and in Hercules, was a lot of interest in transit improvements. And it kind of ran the gamut from more express bus service into the city, extend BART north, make it cheaper to ride Capitol Corridor, more frequent Capitol Corridor service, maybe BRT on San Pablo Avenue. There was no shortage of ideas. There were a plethora of ideas. But this study would give us the opportunity to evaluate a variety of things, to do them under one umbrella that spans across multiple organizations, while simultaneously working with those organizations who may themselves already be working on developing certain concepts that we could fold into this study. For example, AC Transit is looking at BRT on San Pablo Avenue. Ideas like that, or ferry ideas that you've already studied, we would probably just wrap those right in. As far as CCTA involvement, we would love to have the involvement of your staff, either on a selection panel to help choose consultants, or maybe in a more direct way than just participating on our TAC for this study. We're talking about a smaller group, primarily composed of the operators, to be our kind of a project management group that would oversee this effort, and would love to have your staff be part of that if that's something that the authority is interested in. So we would strongly encourage you to support this proposal. Again, we're looking for another $300,000 from MTC for this effort. At our board meeting last week, as Martin mentioned, the board did take up your staff suggestion of adding in another $100,000 to be there as a contingency. So with your participation and with the participation of MTC, we would have the money to be able to do a pretty thorough study that I think could be beneficial not only to West County as we're looking at what sorts of major investment opportunities are there over the near and long term, but I think it could be beneficial to the county as a whole, just given how intensely congested that I-80 corridor is, and given that the limited number of opportunities beyond the I-80 ICM project that's currently going in there, there just aren't a whole lot of things that we have in our toolbox to be able to address that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the detail and the scope or anything else having to do with the study.
Questions of John? Seeing none, I have something I want. There's two parts of this thing as I read it. I'm not sure this is John, but every once in a while you read a sentence and you go, was that, am I reading this right? Summary of issues. Staff seeks direction of the authority's role in the study. All I do is flash back to the 24 study, which tells me that probably your SWAT people may have a problem with this, so be ready to chime in. We didn't want to spend, what was it, $125,000 or $250,000 RM2 money for that large study on 24. They think there's a better use of money. So I just, yeah, it was something. It was what we came up with was, I think, anyway. I want to stay on this. It's the other part, and whether the authority is willing to dedicate available federal funds towards it. I read that and I start thinking, okay, you're thinking that there's something in there. Is there something in there that bothers you, that worries you, staff? Okay, that's that. Then it was me. Go ahead.
Commissioner, the only thing that worries me is if MTC doesn't kick dollars in.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's.
The question would be then, what do you do with that hole in the
Yeah.
funding? Is it, are you able to move forward, or do we have to start working on Steve and company to make sure that we get $300,000?
Well, you beat Amy up and tell her to go work.
I think that our board would have to take it up again. I mean, if we don't get
Yeah.
full participation to do this the way we'd like to do it, it may just be something our board decides we don't pursue at all. But
Well, John, let me.
Yeah.
When you sit here a couple of years, you start to see things and you try to correlate. How does this relate to other things that happen? I.e., Hercules, the trains, when we went into it and kept going on and on and on. As long as our staff is comfortable with the $300,000 and the federal money, I mean, I'm willing to go along with it. What I'm trying to anticipate, is there anybody here that sees that Wednesday night, oh, by the way, we didn't discuss this at Planning Committee, but. Okay, David, you were first, then Karen.
Sure. I guess my first question is, what's the added cost to the project, in air quotes project, of needing it to be federalized in order for us to be considering using federal funds? Is it any cheaper if we use a different source of funds, for example?
It's always a little bit cheaper if you use other sources of funds. You don't have to federalize it and go through that lengthy process. But in this case, those are the funds that we have available. And we've assured John that we would help him to make sure he gets through that federal program without getting a FIN, or federal ineligibility notification, or doesn't pass an audit. So we're standing side by side with John and making sure that this happens and it's done correctly.
So let me ask you a slightly different way then. Is it our assumption that at the 1.2 million with the 100,000 reserve, that we've adequately contemplated and covered that whatever added cost of federalizing?
The cost of federalizing, a lot of the cost is in the staff time of getting the approval from local assistance. In this case, since it's surface transportation program funds that we get from MTC, we actually don't have to go through that lengthy approval process of getting an E76. The money is there, the agreement with MTC is there to use the funding. So it's primarily the increased cost. John would have to spend more time making sure he follows the federal procurement process. We would have to spend more time looking over his shoulder, and then we do have a consultant that helps us, and that's essentially it, a staff. I think it's a fairly minor cost. It's nothing on the scale of 1.2 million. It's probably be fairly hard to detect, I think.
All right. Next question related to that is how tight do we think the 1.2 million number is? And what I'm worried about, of course, is scope creep. And, being back here a year from now or half a year from now saying we need another $1 million to complete the study and that sort of stuff.
We'd have a not to exceed budget, and we have no anticipation of blowing through that budgeted amount. We think we can do exactly what we need to do with that amount.
Those were the words I wanted to hear. All right, thank you.
Karen?
And I'm sorry if I missed it, but okay, I get where 600 is. So we're being asked to how does this affect equity?
And the budget next year or whatever.
Pardon me? Well, yeah, I mean, here's 600,000. I mean, do we have just federal funds sitting around, or are we applying for these? If we have them sitting around, are they non-dedicated? And if they're non-dedicated, how much is there that's non-dedicated? It's not that I'm against this, but is this like...
You got to ask the question.
Yeah, West County's coming in the door. What happens when East County comes in and says, oh, but I wanted some of that money? I'm just trying to figure out if there's been an evaluation of spending, and do we have this, or we have to apply for it?
We have this money coming to us through MTC. There's obviously an opportunity cost. If we spend $300 in West County, that's $300 we don't have to spend somewhere else. So there's an opportunity cost. And also, as you note, there's no process here. We haven't asked each RTPC, hey, do you want to do a study to look at high transit extension? And in all likelihood, one of the action items that will come out of this 2014 CTP is indeed do a study to look at Walnut Creek to Dublin and see what that, and that's easily another 1.2 million. So we've this probably isn't the most graceful thing protocol-wise because we haven't done that, but this is a single request coming in from WICTAC. We're bringing it to you to get your ideas and see how you feel about it, but we haven't gone through that process of asking everybody, and if
So
they
how much
want
do
it,
we
and
have?
we don't have enough for everybody.
Okay. So how
this
much is in the fund right now?
This is a squeeze off the top kind of thing of 300. There's about 300 there that we can inflex that we could put towards this.
So if we put 300, that's still only 900. Where's the other 300
Oh, and then
coming?
the other 300 comes from MTC.
I thought they were
so
already,
They're not in yet.
WICTAC's given 3, BART's given 3, they're asking
Yeah.
us for 3,
Yeah.
and if MTC would
Yeah.
give 3.
And because of the matching funds, we think it's a pretty good deal. We're getting a $1.2 million study for 300.
No, I
so
don't
we're-
disagree, but I think we need to forward this to the full authority for
Oh,
discussion.
definitely. No, that's why I was asking more questions. This one, we don't slide through with motion, Mitchoff second. No, we need, because I'm still waiting for the second part of this, provide direction to staff on authorities' role in the study. Is there any comments anybody else has? Dave's jumping in there ahead of you, Karen.
Well,
go ahead, Karen.
just to
Karen-
finish, I
Karen
mean,
pulled rank on you, Dave.
no, I'm sorry, I don't have enough information.
Yeah.
I don't know, are we being asked to do all of it? Are we going to be 25% of it? Is there going to be a team? No offense, but if this came before my Board of Supervisors, I don't have enough information to make a decision. I need a recommendation, which we've got. I have a background, which we've got. I don't have fiscal implications. I don't have how the money, how staff is going to be used. So this, to me, is an incomplete request.
David, can you add to that?
Separate question from that.
Good enough.
Okay,
Go.
So I would say probably with a similar initial tenor to it, which is what is the role that our staff really thinks it should be playing in this, consistent with how we've participated in other studies? Because I feel a little uncomfortable trying to give direction about what the role would be without some further context. So what have we done with other studies where we were contributing money but we weren't really sort of in a lead dog role?
Well, there have been other studies of this nature. We did the East Central Traffic Management Study, and we also did the I-680 Arterial Freeway and Ramp Metering Study. And in both those cases, the authority was really more of a fiscal agent than directing everything, including the procurement process, as I recall. So in this case, we are helping with the funding, but it's in WICTAC's hands to do the procurement process and also to manage the consultant. We would participate to the extent that we attend the WICTAC TAC meetings, to the extent that we have board members on WICTAC, and then we're basically doing the paperwork to get reimbursed as costs are incurred. So we have played this role in the past. It has worked. It's a partnership. Everybody has a role in a game, or has a piece of the pie, and so there's interest by all of the parties. And it's not something that's foreign to us by any means. It's partnership.
Yeah, I don't have a problem if the direction from us is, the authority act in the role that it has, consistent with other projects of a similar kind in nature. I'm happy with that. My concern was the not really understanding where the breadth of this question came from, which is sort of the.
Well, I'm not the only one then, huh?
Yeah.
You read that, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, that's it.
Okay. We have Kevin, then Karen, and then we're going to wrap up with Janet.
Wasn't this question addressed earlier in your presentation? What your expectations of this board was to sit on a selecting committee, to do, that was about all I heard, was you were asking for staff to participate in. I didn't hear a whole lot more that you were looking for from the staff.
I think that staff could participate at whatever level you think is appropriate. We're expecting the WICTAC board to act as the policy committee on the study. The policy board, essentially. We are going to have our TAC serve as the TAC, and we may invite some others who don't usually participate in that to be a part of that too. And then we're going to probably have an in-between layer that's more of probably the operators kind of looking at more frequently than the TAC does. And we're happy to have your staff's involvement at whatever level you think is appropriate. I'll also just mention that I'm happy to provide some supplemental information to your staff about how this is going to be organized and managed, and the schedule and the rationale, and other information that may help provide a little more context.
Yeah, I think that would be great before we take it to the full board, so that information is out there and these questions.
Commissioners, we'll modify this agenda item for the board meeting to include your concerns and how we're going to be structured into this. And I know Peter would probably want to be the guy that's involved in this study, because we're going to do something. We're going to do something very similar in the future for another route of significance down the south part of this county.
Get Karen, then Janet.
Well, and that goes, And thank you, because that's what I would want, but I think that staff report needs to have more in it, and that is what we've done in the past. And I don't want to turn this down. On the other hand, maybe it's time to start to think about putting some sort of protocol in place for, or criteria for how this happens, because there's needs all over, and I don't doubt the need for this. But I think our colleagues are going to ask that question, and I don't know if you have a time, if you're working under a time constraint, but if we could have that information when we meet in 2 weeks, what we've done in the past, where there's similar situations where we've taken, something that's come directly from an RTPC.
Karen, for clarification, are you talking about like at the bottom of the staff report that sometimes we get italicized? You want something in there? Strong. So you answer this question, what is our role? That was our concern, you know what I mean?
I would like our staff to give us as much information when it comes back in 2 weeks. I think there's a need for this. I don't think anybody doubts the importance of this work. What I'm trying to get at is how have we handled similar requests in the past, and is it time to consider either changing? If it's been on a case-by-case basis, that's one thing. And I'm not sure that we want to continue going on a case-by-case basis is where I'm going. So maybe some alternatives or options for us on how to deal with these in the future, and how often, you said Martin, you said we'd be squeezing the top to get the 300,000. So that leaves nothing for what, the rest of the fiscal year? How does this impact others? First come, first serve? I don't know. I'm looking for information so we can make a decision in 2 weeks.
Janet has the floor, and when you get to me, if I don't sound like it, I'm agreeing with you. Go ahead.
So what I see this as, first of all, I think that it's pretty easy to say that we have a problem in West County. All you have to do is look at the statistics on traffic delay, for example, and I don't know if we're number one at the moment, but usually we are in the whole Bay Area. So, we win there, or lose is more like the right way to say it. But what I like about this approach is that it doesn't already say what the answer is. It's saying what we need to look and figure out what the answer is to meet the various needs of that area. And okay, but so what this is a general study. It is not a specific study saying that you go this approach and this is how much every piece of the implementation of it will cost. This is not that. I can think back to before EBART, the way EBART came to be was, I believe they did a similar sort of study, and they looked at maybe, I don't know if I'm the only ancient one around who was here long enough. Martin, I bet you were here. And Brad, you too. But anyway, there was a study done then to say, what would we want to do? And they looked at not only BART approach or EBART, they looked at, I think, maybe they looked at, I don't have a clue how it was funded, but the fact, things are funded differently at different points in time because it all depends on where the money is that's available. So, but the approach is to look at the different alternatives rather than saying, I want this solution without having justified it. This is looking at that general thing. This is BART has generously agreed to put in some money, and we've come up with it. And this is a relatively small piece of money that's being asked of here, I think. So we would piece this thing together, and I actually don't see that being the central issue here. But what I do see as though really important for our region is to figure out what is the right approach. And that is what this does. And we do need to have a solution because it's only getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So, and if you look at the hearing I went to on the CTP, everyone was complaining they couldn't even get bus service. There isn't enough room on the bus. We have this severe lack of travel space on public transit in our area. People are complaining in other areas about empty buses. We don't have empty buses. We have these buses that have no room on them, even when we have frequent service. And we need some solutions. And the authority putting in $300,000 towards that seems to me like a pretty adequate thing without having to do, an expensive study to figure out which is the more appropriate one. Anyway, that's kind of,
I think
guess,
David's
all I
going
have to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think David's going to be adding something, but I want to go back to where we're providing direction to staff on the authority's role in the study. And what I'm hearing from Karen, for example, if I had a staff member here, I'd want to know, okay, we saw what you're doing for the 80 corridor. What are we doing for the 680 corridor? And, where's the protocols? And we jump in and where would money be coming? And I think Martin covered that for me. The question's going to come down to what do we have to do. Now, do you want to be trumped by Randy and then?
Yeah, let's.
Okay, go ahead. You turned your light on.
Commissioners, all I was going to say is, conferring with Martin, because he's got a longer span here than I do, over the last decade, I think he said that we funded 4 of these requests, and not with federal money. It was with RM2, and they're outgrowths of needs that when it gets to a certain point, there's nowhere else to turn. We could wait and try to apply for a state grant that we normally do, but it wasn't fleshed out right, and so we didn't have enough information. Now they've got a couple funding partners, and so what we're trying to do is leverage those other 3 funding partners, assuming we get MTC. So that's, in essence, is we allocate $300,000 for a $1.2 million study that we're going to have to need that information for anyway one of these days. So however you decide to fund it, that's one of the issues. The other issue is we don't get these requests very often. And so we don't have to deal with that. So we can try to develop some guiding principles to try to do that, but we don't. It's not like they come and say, hey.
You know how RTPCs get. That's all. You know the rest. Okay. We get protective, so
Yes.
If you're willing to do the geographical equity thing, you're on your own.
No, I'm not saying the geographical. I said guiding principles. I didn't say geographical equity. I think that this isn't, in my opinion, we wouldn't have brought it forward if it wasn't a much-needed fund study. I think their issue is they need 1.2, they can't find the other 3. And
I'm
we're
thinking of
logical.
future, Randy. In fact, I bet David Durant's ready to move and agree with you 100%.
You read my mind. Here's what I would say. I think occasionally when questions are asked, people try to read too much into the questions. So let me try to literally line this up very neatly and easily. From my questions were simply about understanding what it is we were being asked to do by our staff tonight, and whether or not there were, because we're talking about federalizing something, and in my worldview, whenever we've done federalizing, not necessarily here, it costs twice as much as it would have without federalizing. So my question, one of the reasons for the questioning on the federalizing was, is this really a $600,000 or $900,000 project? But in order to get the $300,000 from us, we're jacking up the price tag $300,000, and then why bother? You guys answered that, and that was fine. I'm happy to jump up and down on the table and say yay, yippee, and truly recognize that this is a valid and valuable exercise. I think both what Karen said and I said was not that there's an issue with doing the study. And so I think this is what I'm saying. I think the questioning is being misunderstood or misinterpreted. There's nobody that's questioning, from what I can tell, the need for a study, the recognition of the fact that there is a tremendous transportation transit problem in West County. There is everywhere in a county. It's more extreme in West County. That isn't the piece of the set of questions that I thought I heard. The set of questions was about looking at this as a thing that's come up. I think Karen's question was, how are we going to look at these things that come up from time to time in the future to make sure that there's some version of equity, if I can put words in your mouth, Karen. But how do I want to say this? Secondarily, I think the question really revolved around the way that the question was presented here, right? And I'm not, A, I don't want you to think I'm picking on anybody on staff, and B, I'm really not, okay? But the subject of this was discussion of the role of the authority in proposed West County high-capacity transit study. To me, that sounded like this was a bigger discussion than just authorizing $300,000. When I read the summary of issues and looked at the recommendation, it asked us to provide direction to staff for the authority's role in the study. And so when I was literally saying, what has been our past practice? Do we step in, fund it, and take control? Do we take the lead dog spot? It's all about trying to understand what it is that you guys as our staff need from us and are asking for. It is nothing more and nothing less than that.
Yeah. No, you got it.
And so that literally, that to the extent there's any question about support for the project or anything like that, to me that's off the table. It's literally is, are you guys getting from us what you need and what you were really asking for here?
Before you find out on Wednesday somebody else thought of it. But outside of that, we're ready to move this ahead, and let's do
I'll
it.
move that that the motion is what we asked staff to come back to for our October 15th meeting.
Okay. We have a motion, Mitchoff, second Abelson. Well, it's going to be strange minutes. A-M-M-A. Okay, seeing no objection, no abstentions, move it to October, whatever they are. Oh, go ahead. You got a
No, no,
comment?
I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to leave.
Good. I mean, not good.
No, no.
I'm still on the drugs. I'm still on the
It's
drugs.
all right. I have to be somewhere at 7:30, so I'm very, very sorry. But
You don't want to do 7:43 or
No,
any
I've looked
comments?
ahead at it, and I'm fine with whatever decision everybody else makes.
Okay, we're on to item 5 is the update on Senate Bill 743. It's CMA function. Matt Kelly has a staff report, and the recommendation is to transmit a comment letter from authority to OPR regarding draft SB 743 guideline. Is this Steinberg?
It is.
Oh, you're up.
Well, Senate Bill 743, as you may remember from last month, was introduced by Steinberg and passed late last year, and basically the main impact on transportation agencies is that it removes level of service as a finding of significance under CEQA. It also authorized the Governor's Office of Planning and Research to update the CEQA guidelines, and the legislation called for the change level of service in transit priority areas. It also authorized the Governor's Office of Planning and Research to make a recommendation that that be expanded statewide. The reason we're here tonight and bringing this comment letter back to you is the comments haven't changed. Last month at the Planning Committee, you directed staff to transmit the letter as is. We took that to the authority. The authority's comments, and in addition to transmitting as is, you asked us to look for other comment letters from our peers and make sure that the comments were aligned. So between that time and the authority meeting, we found no such letters. They hadn't been written yet. So the comments at the authority meeting last month were to keep looking for those letters, specifically from Alameda County Transportation Commission and the Tri-Valley Transportation Committee. And the only other change was that we toughen up the language a little bit. Where last month you guys were okay with the politeness, we've been directed to remove all politeness from the letter, which we have done. You can see the changes in the letter in your packet in red line strikeout or black and white strikeout. And you can see the comments are the same. We have added one comment on the impact to the congestion management program, which is another state required program that requires use of level of service. So we've asked for clarification on that. However, we still don't have any letters from ACTC or TVTC. We expect those letters to come out soon. And the urgency last month was that the comment period ended October 10th. And the authority gave the Planning Committee tonight the authority to make changes and have the letter transmitted. However, since then, OPR has extended the comment period out to November 21st. So that leaves you with a couple of options tonight: to transmit the letter as is, to move it to the authority and have them approve the letter to be transmitted as is, or wait for those comment letters from our peer agencies. That would actually give us through November's authority meeting to wait for those letters and get the comments aligned with our peer agencies. So you have a couple of options, and I'd be glad to take any questions or
Can I
comments you have.
start this off, because I wasn't here, and it sounded like you guys just had a fun time without me. Oh, you're lucky. I look at the authority comments, page 5.3. We're up to it. I like this. I mean, personally, I think the number one message we should want to send is the phased end. Because, I mean, we're trying to give guidance. I'm not sure where some of the other stuff fits in, but then, I don't know about mitigation bank. Gosh, I don't want another one of those. But you know, it's like you do the reality check and you go, why not? Everybody else is. And some of the induced travel stuff, boy, here we go. But I mean, it's like you have to touch all these bases. I'm sitting here and I listened. Maybe I didn't get it right from Newell, but let's recommend a CCTA letter should match the tone and content of TVTC and ACTC. I have a hard time thinking Transpac is going to take the lead from TVTC. I don't want to take the lead from TVTC. And I think what you did, we had a problem before of being too harsh. I mean, of being this, you'll do it our way or else. And he took or else. And I don't know if we want to go down that road. Now, I'm just throwing this stuff out. I look at the recommendation on page 5 of 6. Staff recommendation is to transmit the attached revised comments to OPR as is. I think that honestly is going to be one of your meeting ones, but I'm fine with it. You won't see me jumping out to the start. I might get my tail kicked when I get back to the office for not consulting before I came, but I'm sick. I'm still under the drugs. I still get a pass for the rest of the night. But anyway, that's my opinion. I think you did a good job on this, particularly the first bullet. I think that's the message. First and foremost, Janet.
Yeah, the letter we're talking about is on 565.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
65, right? Okay. So,
The letter itself starts on 5.7, but the comments on 5.6 are from the letter, or match the letter.
I'm looking at the wrong letter.
No, you got it. This one right here? No, you don't. Take this one.
Oh.
It has Dr. Ken Alex in the upper left-hand corner.
Yeah. And I had one more comment while she's looking through this. I actually, if I can, your very last sentence, we strongly regret your taking the proposed across-the-board action to eliminate level service from CEQA and strongly encourage the trial basis. I'd even add it again at the finish. We think our first bullet is the prime thing, but that's when I use, yeah, I think that. Now, Dave, should we do it? Well, I don't do this, you do. So, I mean, go ahead.
I guess
You're up.
the one thing I have a concern about is that I can remember way back when we were developing Measure J, we talked a lot about LOS not being a good standard in TOD areas, and I just want to make sure that this hasn't got anything in it that implies that it's okay to have LOS in TOD.
We do mention right up front that we do continue to support removal of LOS as a finding of significance under CEQA in
Okay.
transit priority areas.
Okay, that was my only
We're good?
question, I guess. I was looking at the wrong letter, that's what I was doing, so.
Dave, I always defer to you if you do this. I like this.
I was going to ask Mr. Romick, Commissioner Romick, what his thoughts were, since he really wanted
gonna
us to
get
be
it.
stronger before. So-
Mike.
I wasn't terribly disappointed in the original letter. That's why I signed it. And this one, I'm wondering how much impact this will have now that we've strengthened it up. I can see them quivering in Sacramento and saying, "Oh, here comes another letter from that
Laughing
crazy
in
group
Oakland,
that-
quivering in Sacramento.
yeah. That group in Contra Costa. But if it gets its buy-in from everybody, it's important, and that's where I'm.
Yeah, this impact on when it is determined that travel times on a bus route would be increased due to a pending project. Yeah, I think there's good stuff here. I really do. I don't know if I'd try and, other than when you go through it, we always ask Dave or Don, is there an A or a comma or something there? To me, I think you send an extremely clear message. You're not being a jerk. And sometimes we're accused of, all kinds of stuff. But to strengthen it up to, I could imagine who said that, Joe. I don't know why Newell was agreeing. Well, I do, because he wants to send, the smaller cities, that's what the message is. Not everybody's the same. And, there's concern about that. But there's also this train that's coming down the track. And I wouldn't exactly say I'm going to stand in front of these tracks until you yield.
Are you looking for a motion?
Yes. You want me to talk more? Get your button on there. All the lights went up. We don't want to hear anymore.
That we send the letter as is, starting on page 5-7.
To the full board.
Oh, I thought we could just go ahead and send it.
The full board did authorize you to send it tonight.
I was just going to say, let's just go forward.
Dave, go ahead. I'll second it for discussion because I know something's coming. Go ahead, you two.
It's actually really simple. I actually think the right idea is the one that you articulated first, Dave, which is we've made clear our dissatisfaction with it and our strong regret. And I think we don't want them to stop thinking there. I think we want them to grab hold of what the real action item is that we're talking about in the letter as a whole. And so I would simply reiterate, after identifying our regret, that we would ask them to do a trial period.
That's 5-9?
Yeah. To test the tools available, kind of a thing. I think that's a helpful way to end it, because it does communicate what we think is the most important.
I would be happy to change my motion to incorporate
I change that as a second. Kevin, do you want to see this as a board first to get more whipping, or?
No.
Okay, what is your light on for then? All those in favor say aye. 4-0, one left. Mitch off. Okay, you don't need anything more. You got all the guidance in the world, and you're happy as can be. And we're on to 6, other business, news clippings and correspondence. You got anything, Randy or others? Go. Turn on.
I have really good news. The governor signed our El Cerrito bill to increase our sales tax by a half cent above the limit.
Okay. I thought you were going to say he was going to let you pick your successor, but okay. Okay,
So
anybody else?
we do have to now pass our Measure R, which will, where the voters get an opportunity to say they want to do that, but we now have the authority to do it.
Cool. Anybody else? We're adjourned to November 5th. Go home. 15 minutes, huh?